The Longest Day, The Dawn of Liberation. Date, June 6, 1944. Location, English Channel and Normandy coast, France. Before sunrise on that cold, windswept morning, the world stood on the edge of history. The English Channel, usually calm and grey, was alive with motion, the roar of engines, the creak of steel, and the heartbeat of destiny. Across the waters, more than 5,000 ships formed the greatest armada mankind had ever built. There were troop transports packed with young soldiers, destroyers bristling with guns, a massive landing craft loaded with tanks and trucks. In the skies above, over 11,000 aircraft filled the darkness, bombers, fighters, gliders, all converging toward one narrow stretch of coast, Normandy, France. The mission was simple in words, but monumental in reality. Open a Western front, crush the Nazi war machine, liberate Europe. The night before, the silent beginning. On the night of June 5, 1944, under heavy clouds and uncertain winds, the first phase began. From English airfields, over 20,000 paratroopers from the US 82nd and 101st Airborne and the British 6th Airborne Division took to the skies. Their mission: jump behind enemy lines, secure key bridges, block German reinforcements, and create chaos before the invasion. They flew through flak, tracer fire, and storm winds. Many missed their drop zones and landed scattered across the French countryside. But even so, they fought with fierce determination. In the dark fields of Normandy, small groups of men cut German communications, ambushed convoys, and fought village by village. Their bravery paved the way for the invasion force that was still crossing the sea. The Armada moves. At 3 a.m., the engines of the Great Armada growled to life. From Portsmouth, Southampton, and Plymouth, ships moved out like a vast steel tide. Every man aboard knew that within hours, they would face the greatest gamble of the war. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, had made his decision the day before. Despite dangerous weather, he said simply, "Okay, let's go." That command unleashed a force of nearly 3 million men, the United Armies of Freedom, the moment of truth. As the horizon began to glow faintly with the first light of dawn, soldiers climbed down rope ladders into waiting landing craft. Waves crashed, men vomited, and prayers were whispered in every tongue: English, American, Canadian, Polish, French. They were bound together by one goal: to end tyranny. By 6:30 a.m., the first wave of assault craft approached the beaches. Each stretch of sand had a name that would be forever remembered in history: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The Germans were waiting, behind the cliffs, in bunkers of concrete and steel. Machine guns were locked and loaded. Mines and obstacles covered every inch of the beach. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's last hope to repel the invasion, was about to be tested. Fire, steel, and courage. The battle for the beaches. Time, 6:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Location, the Normandy coast, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. The horizon was alive with thunder. From miles offshore, Allied battleships opened fire, their guns flashing in the darkness before dawn. Each shell screamed across the sky and crashed into the coastline, shaking the earth and ripping through German bunkers. The air smelled of cordite and seawater. The invasion had truly begun. Omaha, the beach of blood. As the first landing craft approached Omaha Beach, the soldiers inside could see the cliffs looming ahead, jagged, towering, and lined with hidden guns. For many of them, it was their first glimpse of occupied France. For to many, it would also be their last. When the ramps dropped, chaos exploded. German MG-40 machine guns poured fire into the waves, cutting down entire squads in seconds. Mortar shells rained down, turning the surf red. Men tried to take cover behind metal obstacles and shattered tanks, but there was nowhere to hide. The sea itself became a battlefield. Boats burned, waves rolled with debris and bodies. Radio calls screamed for help, but the beaches were choked with wreckage. Still, amid the slaughter, courage refused to die. Small groups of men crawled forward, inch by inch, across open sand. They dug with their bare hands, used rifles as shovels, and dragged the wounded to safety. Officers shouted above the roar, urging their men to push forward. By mid-morning, a few survivors reached the base of the cliffs. They began to climb, scaling ropes, crawling through smoke, throwing grenades into bunkers one by one. It was slow, brutal work, but step by step, the Americans began to break through. Utah, the fortunate mistake. To the west, at Utah Beach, strong tides had pushed. The first wave of U.S. troops nearly 2,000 yards south of their intended landing zone. It could have been a disaster. Instead, it saved them. General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the oldest man in the first wave, and the only general to land with his troops, looked around, smiled, and said calmly, "We'll start the war from right here." Under his leadership, the men reorganized, advanced inland, and secured their objectives faster than expected. Utah became one of the most successful landings of the day, a victory born from chance and courage. British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Farther east, the British and Canadian forces fought their own fierce battles. At Gold Beach, British tanks known as Hobart's Funnies, modified with chains, rollers, and bridges, cleared mines and obstacles under heavy fire. At Juno, the Canadians faced deadly resistance, but broke through the defences by midday, pushing further inland than any other force. And at Sword Beach, British commandos linked up with airborne units near Kong, securing vital ground for the next phase of the invasion. The turning tide, breaking through the wall. Time: afternoon to night, June 6, 1944. Location: Normandy, France. By midday, the beaches of Normandy were burning. Smoke rolled across the water like a black storm. Ships still fired from offshore, and the thunder of artillery echoed 4 miles. But beneath that haze, amid shattered vehicles, broken guns, and wounded men, something incredible was happening. The Allies were winning, from chaos to control. At first, the invasion looked near collapse. Communications had broken down. Units were scattered, lost, or pinned by German fire. But leadership and bravery began to turn the tide. At Omaha Beach, exhausted survivors rallied around engineers and infantry officers. They blasted holes through the barbed wire and scaled the cliffs under sniper fire. By afternoon, they had seized the heights overlooking the shore. The once deadly beach was now a bridgehead, the first secure ground of the liberation. At Utah Beach, reinforcements poured in, tanks rumbled ashore, artillery rolled forward, and fresh troops fanned out into the countryside. The paratroopers who had dropped the night before were now linking up with the beach forces, securing roads and villages that had been in German hands for 4 long years. The impossible had become reality. The Germans had been outmaneuvered. Their defences, believed to be impenetrable, were cracking wide open. The German response. Inside his fortified headquarters, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was away in Germany when the invasion struck. When news reached Berlin, confusion reigned. Some Nazi commanders still believed the Normandy assault was just a diversion, expecting a second, larger landing at the Pas de Calais. As a result, Hitler refused to release vital armoured divisions, the Panzer Reserves, until it was too late. By the time the German High Command realized the truth, the Allies were already ashore in force. The chance to throw them back into the sea was gone forever. The iron will of the Allies. Through the afternoon, waves of landing craft continued to bring men, tanks, and supplies. The beaches that had been killing grounds in the morning were now alive with activity. Medics tending the wounded, engineers clearing mines, and soldiers digging defensive lines for the night. Everywhere you looked, the determination was unshakable. Men who had faced death only hours earlier were now pushing forward, building roads, carrying ammunition, and preparing for the counterattack they knew would come. By nightfall, over 150,000 Allied troops had landed in Normandy. 5 separate beaches had been united into a single, growing front. Behind them came thousands of vehicles, supplies, and weapons, the machinery of liberation. As darkness fell, the last echoes of gunfire faded into the night. Fires still burned across the beaches. The dead lay silent beneath the stars, but above the devastation, a sense of triumph the air. The road inland. The Battle for Normandy. Date: June 7th, June 30th, 1944. Location: Normandy, France. The beaches were secure, but the Battle for Normandy was only beginning. Behind the sand and surf lay a landscape that would test every ounce of Allied strength. Narrow lanes, deep hedgerows, and stone villages turned into fortresses. It was a battlefield built for defense, and the Germans knew every inch of it. The hedgerow hell. The countryside of Normandy was a maze of bocage, thick hedges of ancient trees, earth, and stone rising up to 10 feet high. Each field was a natural bunker, each road a trap. German machine guns and mortar waited at every corner, hidden behind walls of green. American, British, and Canadian troops who had fought across open beaches now found themselves crawling through fields where they could see only a few meters ahead. Progress was counted not in miles, but in yards. Every day brought brutal close combat. Tanks struggled to move, their turrets trapped by the tight lanes. Snipers watched from farmhouses. Artillery rained from the hills, and every hedgerow felt like a new invasion. It was a nightmare of mud, blood, and determination. The German resistance. The German army had recovered from the shock of D-Day. Veteran divisions of the Wehrmacht and SS Panzer units arrived from across France, led by hardened commanders like Erwin Rommel and Heinz Guderian's protégés. They fought with desperate skill, their tanks lurking like predators, their infantry striking from ambushes. Rommel himself toured the front lines, urging his men to hold every inch of ground. He knew that, if Normandy fell, Germany's fate was sealed. For every Allied advance, the Germans counterattacked twice. The fighting became a deadly rhythm of gain and loss, advance and retreat, a war measured in blood, Allied determination. But the Allies refused to be stopped. Behind the front, the beaches had become vast floating cities. Each day, thousands of tons of supplies poured ashore: fuel, ammunition, food, and reinforcements. The engineering miracle of Mulberry Harbors, giant artificial ports built in days, allowed entire divisions to be resupplied directly from the sea. In the skies above, Allied air power ruled. Bombers struck German positions day and night. Fighter aircraft prowled the roads, destroying convoys and cutting off reinforcements. The once proud German Luftwaffe was nearly invisible. Slowly, the balance shifted. The Allies began to break free of the hedgerows, linking their beachheads into one unstoppable front. Operation Cobra. The breakout from Normandy. Date: July 25th, August 4th, 1944. Location: Western Normandy, France. For nearly 7 weeks, the Allied armies had been trapped in the deadly maze of the Normandy hedgerows. Every field was a fortress, every road a killing zone. But by late July, the Allied commanders were ready to break the stalemate once and for all. The operation that would unleash them was codenamed Cobra. The calm before the storm. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in scale. American General Omaha Bradley would smash a hole through the German defenses near the town of Suntley, using overwhelming air and artillery power. Once the gap was open, fast armored divisions under General George S. Patton would pour through, a hammer blow to drive the enemy back across France. On the morning of July 25, 1944, thousands of Allied aircraft took to the skies. More than 3,000 bombers flew in formation, carrying a storm of destruction toward the German front lines. For nearly 2 hours, the countryside shook under a hurricane of fire. When the smoke cleared, the landscape looked like the surface of the moon. But in that devastation lay opportunity. The German front, exhausted, short on fuel, and pounded from the air, had been cracked open. It was time for Cobra to strike. The thunder of the breakout. American infantry surged forward, led by tanks and supported by artillery that fired almost without pause. They met resistance, machine gun nests hidden in craters, pockets of SS troops who refused to surrender, but the momentum could not be stopped. By July 27th, Bradley's men had torn open a gap more than 5 miles wide, and through that gap came Patton, brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. His Third Army rolled through the breach like a flood of steel. Columns of Sherman tanks, half-tracks, and jeeps thundered south, bypassing strong points, encircling towns, and cutting off retreating Germans. The breakout had begun. After weeks of grinding, suffocating combat, the American army was finally free to move. The collapse of the German line. The German commander in the west, Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, could see the disaster unfolding. His once formidable army, the 7th and 5th Panzer armies, was crumbling. Airstrikes destroyed convoys by day. Allied armor cut escape routes by night. The battlefield became chaos. German units fled in all directions, trying to escape the tightening Allied noose. Entire divisions were surrounded and annihilated in the countryside, south of St. Lay. One German officer would later write, "It was no longer a war. It was an execution." The Falaise Pocket, the trap closes. Date, August 12 to 21st, 1944. Location, Falaise, Chambord and Argentan, Normandy, France. After weeks of hard fighting, the German army in Normandy was collapsing. From the beaches of D-Day to the rolling plains of western France, the Allies had pushed the enemy back with relentless force. But victory was not yet complete. Tens of thousands of German troops were retreating east, and the Allied commanders wanted to end it here, once and for all. The Great Encirclement begins. General George S. Patton's Third Army swept north from the south of Normandy, racing across the countryside with tanks and mechanized infantry. From the north came the Canadian First Army and British Second Army, pushing southward after capturing Cong and Falaise. The plan was bold. The two Allied forces would meet near the town of Chambord, closing a steel trap around the retreating Germans. Inside that trap, known to history as the Falaise Pocket, lay the remnants of Germany's 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army. If the Allies succeeded, it would destroy the entire German presence in western France. If they failed, those forces might regroup and prolong the war 4 months. The Battle of the Trap. By mid-August, the Germans were desperate. Hitler had ordered them to stand and fight, but the Allied advance made that impossible. Roads were choked with burning vehicles, wounded men, and shattered units fleeing eastward. Allied aircraft hunted from the skies, turning every convoy into a column of smoke. At Falaise, Trun, and Chambord, Canadian, Polish, and American troops fought in brutal close combat to seal the ring. Villages changed hands multiple times in a single day. The fighting was savage, tanks dueling point blank, artillery firing over open sights, and snipers in every window. The Polish 1st Armoured Division, fighting on a hill called Mont Ormel, Hill 262, held their ground against massive counterattacks. Surrounded and nearly out of ammunition, they refused to retreat. Their stand became legendary, the Anvil of Falaise. For 2 days they fought alone, blocking the last German escape route and holding the line until reinforcements arrived. The pocket collapses. By August 21, 1944, the trap had closed. The Allied pincers met at Chambord. Inside the pocket, chaos reigned. Tens of thousands of German soldiers tried to flee through gaps in the encirclement, but Allied artillery and aircraft pounded them mercilessly. The once proud panzer divisions were reduced to ashes. The battlefield became a vision of destruction, burned-out tanks, shattered guns, and endless columns of prisoners marching under the Allied flag. An eyewitness described it as a valley of death, the end of an army. By the time it was over, nearly 50,000 German soldiers were captured, 10,000 lay dead, and most of their armor was destroyed. Only a few survivors escaped east toward the Seine, too few to stop the advancing Allied armies. The liberation of Paris, triumph and tears. Date: August 19th to 25th, 1944. Location: Paris, France. After 77 days of fierce fighting in Normandy, the impossible had been achieved. The beaches were won, the hedgerows broken, the German army destroyed at Falaise. Now, before the Allies lay their greatest prize, the beating heart of France. Paris, the city of light, had endured 4 long years of Nazi occupation. Its people had lived under fear and silence, its monuments shadowed by swastikas, its freedom chained. But the moment of liberation had finally come. The resistance rises. By mid-August 1944, as Allied armies surged across France, the people of Paris could wait no longer. The French resistance, underground fighters, policemen, students, and workers, rose up against their German occupiers. Barricades were built from buses, furniture, and paving stones. Tricolour flags, hidden for years, fluttered from windows once again. For the first time in years, the people of Paris were fighting for their city. Street battles erupted across the capital, gunfire echoing through narrow alleys and grand boulevards alike. The German garrison, under General Dietrich von Choltitz, fought to hold control, but the uprising spread faster than he could contain it. Paris was on fire, not from bombs, but from freedom itself. De Gaulle's decision. In the Allied command centers, the situation was tense. The original plan had been to bypass Paris and strike directly toward Germany, avoiding the risk of urban warfare. But when news arrived of the uprising, one voice could not remain silent. General Charles de Gaulle, leader of the Free French forces, he declared, "Paris outraged, Paris broken, Paris martyred, but Paris liberated, liberated by her own people and by the armies of France." With that, the decision was made. The French 2nd Armoured Division, led by General Philippe Leclerc, would race ahead to save the city. Behind them followed the US 4th Infantry Division, ready to support the final push, the battle for the City of Light. On August 24th, the first Free French tanks rolled into the southern districts of Paris. Citizens poured into the streets, cheering, crying, throwing flowers and waving flags. Gunfire crackled from rooftops as the last German units resisted. Through the night, fierce battles raged near Hôtel de Ville and Notre Dame Cathedral. By dawn on August 25th, the tricolour flag once again flew over the city. General von Choltitz, defying Hitler's direct orders to destroy Paris, surrendered his garrison. The city was saved. At 3:30 p.m., Leclerc accepted the German surrender at the Gare Montparnasse, ending 4 years of occupation. The March of Freedom. The next day, August 26, 1944, Paris awoke to scenes that would live forever in memory. General Charles de Gaulle marched down the Champs-Élysées, surrounded by his soldiers and thousands of jubilant Parisians.